Hey everybody, this is Lyric Lander, and I just wanted to briefly kind of take a look at how ballast-based submarines work. I just put the finishing touches on my U322, and by the time you see this video, it'll be uploaded to the workshop. So there's three submarine types that you have in Last Leviathan. There are hydroplane submarines, there are thrust-based submarines, and then there are ballast-type submarines. And I'd say the submarine that's probably the closest to submarines that exist in the real world are ballast-based. So I'm going to pop this in the water here. I'm also going to head out kind of to the edge of the map because if you don't already know it, if you get out past this line here where you can see my cursor, if you get past that line, there's a texture for the sea-based floor, but you can actually dive beneath it, and it's a really great proving ground for submarines. So it'll take me a little while to trundle on out there. So, with hydroplaning subs, it's kind of like my first submarine that I built, the U-211. And that one's a hydroplane sub because its ability to dive is based purely off of its shape and how it's balanced, and that once you get it pitched in the right direction, it'll dive. And as long as you move left or right, the shape of the sub and how the sub is balanced will hold it underwater. This is a ballast-based sub, where the pitch of the sub is determined by which ballast tanks you flood on the ship. And there's another submarine that I'll try and post a link to in this video, at least for the workshop, where it was thrust-based. It was before the ballast cubes came out, and how it worked was you would rotate the motors on either side of the submarine, and it would force the submarine to go underwater. So I'm going to start the diving process here. I have three tanks. I have a middle ballast tank, a fore ballast tank, and an aft ballast tank. There's actually two of them. So I'm going to hold down on the plus key here. The ones in the center of the submarine, I kept just the standard layout. The forward ballast tanks are controlled by the numpad 9 for flooding them and 3 for clearing them. And then the rear ballast tanks are filled with the 7 on the numpad, and they are also cleared with the 1 on the numpad. And I did that just to keep them close to the plus and the minus, and then I also did that because I don't want them to interfere with your torpedo control tubes. Alright, so if you want to dive, naturally, since we have the centermost tank all the way full, you have to start flooding the front tanks, so I'm going to start doing that. Hold down the 9 key, and as the front ballast cubes start filling, you can see that I start to pitch downward. I start flooding the back tanks because I'm trying to control my dive. I don't want it to be too steep. And then you can see here, this is kind of where it gets, well, I don't know if the game makers intended to do this, but as you can see, once you get below the map, and you look up, it just looks like water. It just looks like, well, really deep water if you get this deep. And then this is basically how you control the dive of your sub, is by the flooding and clearing of the tanks. So it's basically a big seesaw. If I clear the tanks in the back of the sub, you can see that my pitch increases. If I start filling the tanks in the back of the sub, my pitch decreases. Because it's all about weight and balance. So if you're building a submarine and you decide to work with ballast cubes, you may not have to use a ton just to get your submarine to sink. You may just need to change where you place them. You can see right here behind my torpedoes, there are my 4 ballast tanks. Behind the torpedoes over here, here's the aft ballast tanks, and if I go underneath the submarine, there are the centermost ballast tanks. Keep in mind that if you're building a ballast-based sub, you're going to have to get the balancing just right. I'd say the best thing to do is build your sub, arm your sub, try and get it balanced the way you want it, and then add the ballast tanks. But keep in mind, you're going to have some in the center for just general weight, and then to control your dive, you're going to have to place some ballast cubes in the front and some ballast cubes in the back. That's kind of all for this video. Please like, subscribe, and I will see you later.